I was counting down with my fingers, and I really felt like Mike in Monsters, Inc. when he was counting down to Sully to scare the children. I just wanted everyone to know this.
I don't like the implication that I'm Sully.
Sully's cool.
I wouldn't want to be either of them.
I suppose.
I would want to be, what's her name with the snakes? I've only seen this movie a couple of times.
She's a bad bitch.
Exactly.
She's great.
Anyway, today's episode, we are talking about historical road trip romances. Because I recently read one, other than Heartbreaker, which is also technically a road trip romance.
It is.
We just talked about it. So, but I read one and I was like, oh, I don't dislike road trip romances, which is a thing that I thought was true about myself. I dislike the concept of contemporary road trip romances. Do you like actual in real life road trips?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't mind them. I think that if I have a comfortable seat, because I drove to New York there and back, I drove to Portland there and back. Hated driving to Portland because of mountains. New York was fine. We had one truck, and then dealership called. They were like, hey, let's trade in that truck and get you a new truck. I was like, okay, whatever. I mean, my parents said that. I was like, why? And so we got a new truck, and it has like different seats than the original one, and we have a cabin like 6 hours away, and I had to sit on the middle seat in the back because we have a dog and she likes to, you know, stretch and sprawl, and she's in the seat next to me, and then my sister's next to me. My ass was so sore after like 2 hours in that car. So I hate road trips when I am in the middle seat, but other than that, yeah, I do. I don't mind them.
I like them in theory. I always think they sound
snacks.
really good. The snacks are great, but as soon as I'm actually in them, especially if I have to drive.
Oh, yeah, if I'm driving, that's going to be a no-go.
I do not enjoy. I like them as a concept in practice. Generally, no. And so I feel the same way about contemporary road trip. Like, I don't actually know if I've ever read any contemporary road trip romances. I'm sure I must have.
There was like one from Berkeley that was just recent, but it was closed door. Or I couldn't get like a solid answer on if there was sex. So I was like, it's going to be a no for me, and I didn't read it.
But I just like, they don't sound appealing to me. I don't like. I understand it's like the forced proximity thing. I mean, for the same reasons that a historical road trip works, I assume. But there's something about it being in a car. And like, I think that you come across different issues in a contemporary. Like, I love a good. We get to a posting in, and they have to like order a bath to the room, and then obviously, if there's only one room, they have to pretend to be married because unmarried people could not be sharing a room together. Yes, my wife. Like, there are just other things that you deal with in historical that I like better than in real life. Also, there's no only one bed scenario in contemporary life. You never get anywhere and go, no,
either
there's
only no vacancy.
Even if there's no vacancies, you just go find another hotel like 5 miles away.
I mean, I feel like there'd be some, like, I've definitely been in places where like the town where our cabin is like has like a few different like motels because it's not that big. It's like a tourist town, but you could probably still at that point find one, or you just drive like a half hour. So like
I just
there's
think
always
it would be hard. The exception, I read The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa, and that one had a like an overnight trip in it. Oh, I liked it. It has an.
I had the audiobook, and then they had sex, and then it got returned, and then I just never went back. It wasn't bad.
Okay, well, I liked it, but there's an overnight there where her car breaks down, so they're stuck in this town where there is one or not even a town, I don't think. It's like she's going to check out a wedding venue, and it's like a B&B, and there's a couples retreat going on, so there really is only one room because it's in the middle of a retreat, and they're like, well, you could, like, stay in the, like, barn, basically, or you could, like, I don't know, if you're a couple, you want to join in the couples retreat, and so they have to, like, pretend to be a couple. So, like, that's one where you can work in. It works, the, like, only one room, your road trip, the car breaks down, whatever. But most of like, you have to have some really extenuating circumstances to get me to buy that there isn't, like, a Marriott a few miles away.
Yeah. And cars are just not as fun.
They're not as fun.
But, like, Leap Year. Give me that road trip any day of the week.
Leap Year works. Leap Year is one of the best movies ever, so.
It is.
Maybe I'm just a liar.
Well, that's a movie, though. You know, that's like an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's so different. Because, like, things I love in movies just do not work for me in books sometimes because I don't want to be reading for 6 hours of that. But like an hour and a half where I can do other things, sign me up.
Well, also, with a carriage, neither of them are driving. Well, if it's like an aristocrat, like usually there's a driver outside and you never really talk to the driver. Nobody's concerned about the driver like driving through horrible weather. Well, there was what did I just read where they like tried to cross a bridge in the middle of a horrible storm and the driver ended up getting like really injured and they felt super bad. God. Oh, what is it? They thought he had died. They really thought he had died because the bridge collapsed while they were trying to get across it. And then it turns out he was fine. And then they had to like go find this cabin.
It's the Matthew Swift. It's Daisy.
It's Scandal in Spring?
Spring.
Okay. That was really going to bother me. I was like, they're in a cabin. Dramatic. They send the guy back.
But that's the perfect kind of conflict.
No. Oh my God. No, that's a different carriage that falls into a bridge. I'm thinking of a different one.
Oh my God. There's another.
Oh. It's the Stacy Reid. It's the purple cover.
A Matter of Temptation? Maybe?
Nope.
Didn't think so because I was like, I don't
remember. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and the hero is
Darling Duke. My Darling Duke.
My Darling Duke. Oh, okay. And it was a whole thing because he couldn't walk all the way back because he's disabled.
I did not like the narrator of that book, so I've only listened to it once. But I should go back and read it just physically.
Well, it's a great book. Highly recommend.
I know. Like, everyone loved it. I read the second one first, as I am wont to do. I do not read things in order. Normally, I'm trying. But I loved the second one. He calls her Raccoon. It's so cute. And so the first one didn't hit as good, but I will go back at some point because I just love Stacy. Keep going.
No, I just love a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I think that's a classic, like, scarred hero as Beast, but I really liked that he was actually disabled, and that wasn't just, like, kind of swept under the it was like he was he was actually disabled. Yep. That was dealt with in the story. It was part of his character. He did, and it showed, like, he would push himself, and that would actually be detrimental to his health, where he would, like, hurt himself trying to do too much, which I appreciated, and then there was no, like, magical healing. There is one thing that does feel a little bit magical healing-y, but there's like a medical explanation for it that actually made perfect sense. Yes. Where he thought it would never work again. And like the doctors were like, you're impotent, it'll never work again. And then the one guy was like, no, you're just like healing. Like, it's just, it takes energy and you like were not mentally or physically in a place to be like aroused. And now you are. So, and it doesn't always... And then even when they can have sex, most of the time, it's like she's on top. I don't know. Do we want to do like alternate? I don't know how many you have.
Yes. Well, we have a few that overlap.
4/5. Yes, and some of them do overlap. My first one, which I know you also have, is A Road to Remember by Emily Sullivan, which I feel the need to say is a forever book. And I do work for the publisher. So this is my disclaimer. That all of the opinions are my own. Anyway, A Road to Remember by Emily Sullivan.
One of the first books I ever received from Forever. And then I actually won a giveaway from Emily. So mine's signed. And then I had to do a giveaway for the other copy that I got from Forever.
This was also one of my first books from Forever. Because I had read the Amanda Collins.
Gorgeous.
It is gorgeous.
Cover has no business being this beautiful.
Because I had read the Amanda Collins and posted about it on TikTok, and Dana found me on TikTok. This is pre me really knowing Forever. She emailed me and was like, would you like some historical romances, including the new Amanda Collins? And I was like, absolutely. And one of them was A Road to Remember. The other one, I got both of the first two Winchester books, the Duke Heist.
That was then.
And The Perks of Loving a Wall. And those were I think actually, besides like the two Tessa Dare that I've read, those were the first like clinch cover mass market. I mean, they were mass market Max, but like those were some of the first non-trade.
I agree. Because I started my account in 2020, at the end of 2020, and then early-ish in 2020, Erica Ridley DM'd me. I don't know how she found me. She sent me the Duke Heist. But this book was great. I loved it so much. Good. It's set in Italy.
Yes, which I was an Italian minor and I studied abroad in Italy, so I was like, I'm really annoying.
You were living large.
I was a study abroad girl, if you will, with a capital letter.
My friend was too. She got stuck there with the COVID outbreak.
I narrowly avoided. I had a lot of friends that got stuck in Italy for that same reason.
Horrible.
I had gone the summer before, so I was good. But it means that the whole time I was like, I know what they're saying. I know where they, whatever. I'm annoying. It's the first book in the League of Scoundrels series, which now there are 3 of them. I do think it's kind of funny. The characters from the second book, you see them in the third book. Like, those 2 couples are intertwined.
Yeah.
Because they're friends. You never really see, like, there's mention of the couple from this first book. They occasionally will be like, oh, Alec. And I really like Alec and Lottie.
And I loved
so
Lottie
like,
and Alec.
Yeah.
This is my favorite in the series because it just has such a different vibe. Like it just the Italian scenery, like the description. It's one of truly the first like I was getting back into that genre because I had like a gap, started Bookstagram, and then was starting to get back into it. And so I just really loved the atmosphere, and it was like very just pretty to me. Obviously, I mentioned in the last episode, I can't see things when I read. I close my eyes, there's nothing. But this one I feel like even though I can't see, like I feel like I see, it's
like the atmosphere. So
Yeah.
this is a road trip basically across the Italian countryside, to ultimately come back to England. So Lottie, she was raised by her uncle, right? It's been a long time since I've read this book, so I'm like,
and he is
really
like
going
this,
off of what I remember.
He's like this spy master.
Yeah, he like works for the Foreign Office or something. So she was raised by her uncle, and Alec was also raised by her uncle as a ward. Lottie was orphaned, so that's why she raised by him. But she has gone off to live in, I don't remember where exactly, it's probably the Tuscan countryside.
Because I sure don't know.
That's where her parents like honeymooned,
yes,
I think.
Yep.
And so she's always heard about this town. So she has tried to ruin her reputation,
as
unsuccessfully. She basically like left it. She made it look like some Italian, like a made up Italian man
her away.
was a lover. Yeah, and like whisked her
Sent
away
her
while she was away. So she's just like off chilling in the Italian countryside. I don't even remember why actually.
Well,
it doesn't really matter. The point is that she doesn't want to be where she. Maybe he was. I think he was gonna. Like,
okay, wait. I got
married, right?
Context clues.
Context clues. We should have reviewed these books.
Yes, her uncle was gonna marry her to someone. She was like, she either must choose a husband or he'll find one for her.
Yeah.
She just
so he's like, you gotta get married, and she's like, I think not. So she goes off to the Italian countryside and pretends to be a widow, and it's just like off. I think she like paints or something, like living her best life.
She does. Yep. She's like learning how to paint. She's got
all of a sudden, Alec Gresham shows up, and Alec is
wow.
Yes, I did, because that's a name, Alec Gresham. That's like so Victorian.
So good.
That's a Victorian spy name. Anyway, Alec, who was raised like they grew up together, he was raised also by her uncle,
and she thought he loved her, and then he left.
So her uncle is doing the spy things, and you never really know what's going on with him, but he's like got his fingers in everything. Like he's a little slimy. He's a little
slimy.
And Alec is of a different social class, importantly, despite the fact that they were raised together and they were always too close. And then so he gets sent off to school when they're kids, but they're still too close for comfort. They're still very good friends, and they write letters and such. And he comes back when they're 16, and it's like I think her coming out or something.
It was her coming out.
It was her coming out,
and she was like so excited and happy.
And they were like so clearly almost in love, and then something happens.
Someone was a tricky bastard.
Spoilers. Once again, we're discussing the spoilers for this book.
What do you think would happen?
What do you think? What could it be? Who would get in the way? And so she, of course, thinks that he just abandoned her, and he thinks that he is doing what's best for her, when in reality it's the uncle meddling and sending him off to be a spy. So now he basically never found love. Is that guy's boss. Yeah, so she's off in the Italian countryside, and he shows up and is like, I have to bring you back.
My favorite thing, he moonlights. I'm saying moonlights again, if you guys caught that horrible use in the last one. He's like a hot professor.
He's like as a hot professor.
He is an astronomical man. Just kidding. He is a professor, so he's like an undercover spy. So his like alias is a professor, and he's just hot. Doesn't he have like glasses or something? He just gave like the best vibes. I was so attracted to him being a professor.
Real hot. And you get fake marriage, because when he shows up in the Italian countryside, she's told everyone, like her housekeeper and everyone, and her painting master, that she's a widow. And he shows up to get her because, like, her uncle's really sick and is like, go
and it's
get
like the
Lottie.
first time
and
he's seen
the
her.
uncle knows that Alec is the only one that can go get her.
Yep.
And successfully. And so he, like, doesn't want to be here because he's
without
been
causing a
in love with
scandal
her forever. Yeah. Anyway, so he shows up, and in order to get in through the door, he says, I'm her husband. And so the housekeeper is like, hell yeah. Like, she's in love with him. Yeah. So now they have to lie and pretend to be married because he already said that. And there's it's so good.
And my favorite part is that this happens on like page 3 or something. Like, you start the book out with them together. You don't have to wait like 50 pages, 20 pages for them to like be on the same page. Like, they are normally always on the same page, which was one of my favorite things about this. Obviously, forced proximity is a thing of road trip. But I just loved how, like, from the start, they were there together.
They're always together. Well,
and the best
so
vibes.
not only is it just a road trip to get back, it's also he's a spy. So they're like infiltrating parties undercover and like getting shot at, and he has to like get her, and they have like, you know, racing through they're like in Venice. They have to like go hop on one of those things, gondola.
He's got a hot spy friend.
He's got a hot spy friend who
perhaps
like
gets tied to a chair
intense.
at some point.
Perhaps in the next book.
And he thinks she's like a bad person, so he like interrogates her in the middle of the night.
Her.
Yeah,
Woo!
And she's like,
it was hot too.
It was.
Right.
He was just looking out for his friend.
And he's the hero of the next book, of course. That man is fine. Anyway, so that's like the overall vibes of this one. I, again, don't remember a ton about the details of the plot, but I do remember the vibes and the setting because it was just so delightful.
Yeah, we covered most of it. I think it was just a very like light and easy.
It's like second chance in that they were like almost in love as kissed, but it's also like friends to.
So they're a little bit angry,
lovers,
at each other.
But there's some betrayal in there.
Yep.
A lot of feelings that never quite got to come to the surface. I love pining. Nothing but pining. And of course they have to like travel together and pretend to be married and do all the things that you want in a good road trip. Yeah.
And I really liked that one. And I think I read it a second time via audiobook maybe. So yeah. Okay.
What's your next pick?
Okay, well, I'm going to start out, the top one. To Catch a Raven by Beverly Jenkins. Have you read this one?
Not yet.
Oh my god, okay. So, off the bat, someone steals the Declaration of Independence, which is the sexiest phrase I have ever heard. I love National Treasure, okay? You know, if I had the chance to steal the Declaration of Independence and have, like, Nick Cage and Justin Bartha, like, chase me, I would do it. Like, hands down. And so, basically...
That's a fascinating choice for you.
I love those movies, okay? So, as soon as I heard that this book was... like, someone stole a declaration, they have to go find it, I was sold.
Nicolas Cage's voice is echoing in my brain right now, by the way.
It should be. It's
going to try to steal the Declaration of Independence.
There's, like, this bit where Andy Samberg plays Nick Cage on SNL, and he's just like, And it's...
Do you watch the show Community?
Yes, I have. I haven't finished it, but...
Have you gotten to Abed's Nicolas Cage bit?
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, there's a show called Community. It's most of it... Well, the first, like, 3 seasons are really excellent. The rest are good, but not as good. But there's a bit where Abed really loves movies and TV shows. I can say words. And he takes a class on Nicolas Cage, and the professor like really warns him not to, because they're trying to figure out whether Nicolas Cage is definitively a good or bad actor.
He's something.
He's something, but they can't decide. And so he's like, Abed, do not watch all of Nicolas Cage's movies. And he does it anyway. He watches all of Nicolas Cage's movies, which is an unhinged amount of movies, by the way. And he like loses his mind and does this bit where he like becomes unhinged and is like possessed by the soul of Nick Cage, basically. We'll have to link it in notes because it is my favorite scene. He like gets on the desk and is like, I'm a cat, I'm a sexy cat, and you're like, what's going on and why? It's so funny. Oh, I'm so sorry, that was a tangent to your
There should
6
always
degrees of
be a
separation
tangent
between Community and Beverly Jenkins.
to catch her. I love it.
Anyway, To Catch a Raven.
So the book starts out with a huge like premise. You're like, okay, someone has stolen this. They have to go rescue. So in the past, her mother and his father were like lovers. They had like dated, some like fate intervened. They did not get married. They both married elsewhere and had good lives, had many children. So there's that. And it opens up where Raven is like part of this like huge, I think it's like Levesque. They're the Levesque family.
Oh yeah, I read the first
like,
one, the Levesque.
Yeah, so a lot of them are either like thieves or like swindlers, like stuff like that. You know, they're very like crafty and people I want to be. Like I have no finesse and no anything, so they're very cool.
The first Levesque book, by the way, is a revenge seduction. Second Chance.
Why haven't I read that? Okay.
Through the
Storm. Shall be.
Many content warnings for it's during and after the Civil War, and a lot
this
of the
is
plot
also
hinges on like racial violence and slavery. So like there's a lot of that. But
this
great book.
This one has a former Confederate soldier is the one accused of stealing the Declaration. So at this point they're like, we gotta go. So this like corrupt not like police officer, whatever they were called at that time, comes to Raven and she's like, well, I'm either going to arrest you or you're going to go get this declaration for me. And so Raven's like, well, I don't have many options. I guess that's what I'm going to do. So she goes home, packs up, they bring her mom too, and then they go, I think, to Braxton, who's the hero. So Raven and Braxton. And then his father, they find somehow they're all put into a room. So it's the two older and the two younger. And the two older ones still have little sparks going. So there's like a cute secondary love story between the parents.
Love.
I know, it was so cute. And then there was obviously them. And like he is very starchy, buttoned up. He's a tailor. So he gets those silhouettes. So he he very admires.
He can take my measurements any day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he does.
I haven't read this book. I just already know because it's
Beverly Jenkins. He was so good. And so, you know, he doesn't really want to do it. Raven really doesn't want to either, but there's really no way they can get around it. I think the cop was also like blackmailing his family. So this person is corrupt, not a good person. Ends up being, spoilers, obviously, like one of the main villains, because she tries to like sneak one past him and does not work for her. One of my favorite endings for a villain is in this book. And so
that's saying something for you because
it is every person should be shipped off to Australia if you're a bad person.
I do. There's another book I love where they forge papers and transport the villain to Australia, which is just
like she thinks she got away with it, and then like they like poison her. Like with like bad food, and so she's
Beverly,
just like,
from what I have read, she really does get rid of her villains.
Oh my god, yeah. There have been a few where they
either dead or in prison, like they're gone.
Yep, that is a thing I agree with. And so I really loved the ending of this, just because she's like in the bathroom most of the time at the end, but also then gets arrested and shipped off. Not really arrested,
God, Hannah,
like her family.
Through the storm, the villain is like, he was going to the heroine starts the book enslaved, and he was going to buy her, so he keeps coming back and being like, I bought you, blah blah blah, and she's literally leave me alone. And so the end of the book, he like takes her and the kids that they've adopted and like disappears off to his plantation and like basically forces her back into slavery. And so the hero and his like brothers have to like come find her and rescue them. And the punishment for the hero in Through the Storm is that they ship him off to Africa to be a slave.
Amazing.
And that's not even the first. There's another, like, it's an interconnected, like, a hero and heroine from a previous book show up in this one. And the reason they do that is because they did that, I think, to the villain in their book. So they just, like, already know it works.
Yep. So they've got, like, a very cool family. Like, they know how to get shit done. Like, they've got, like, a web of just, you know, people who have vengeances. Like,
and another branch of that family is the Old West series, and they also get rid of their villains. I love that series.
And even like side villains.
The villain gets eaten by a one-eyed bobcat that's been terrorizing the town.
Well, that's going in our crazy animal segment.
And then the bobcat dies from eating bad meat. Or like whatever that like wild cat is. I don't know. I think it's a bobcat, but like Oh my god. Talia is like your kind of
she
writer.
Is. So we're back to Catch a Raven.
Yes.
So they have to go on this road trip to this house of the former Confederate official. His like wife is there. I think either he like left her with no money or like he died and there's someone else. I don't know. There are multiple things working there. But Raven has to pretend to be like a servant, and then he I think is also like they're pretending to be married, so we've got the fake engagement or like fake marriage, and so obviously they go, and so Raven has always worked her entire life. The basic theme of her family was that like you will work so that your future generations don't have to, and so they all just are very hardworking, and she's never really had a day off. So this man just pampers the shit out of her. I think I featured this in my love languages because truly, like if you want gifts, if you want words of affirmation, like Good Girl is here in like a bathtub. It was just a very like sensual book. It was just like the lead up and like himself because he was so hot and he just truly cared for her and just did everything she needed because like she obviously had like blisters on her hands from like doing the laundry and like the whatever chemicals they used were like very abrasive, so he just would not let her like tax herself at all. Lots of baths. And that was like my favorite part because the plot was a bit disjointed. It was kind of like random at times. It was just odd, but it was a good odd. We love Unhinged, and so I just really liked the forced proximity of the two and him just always pleasuring her. he had a little bit of a dirty mouth. I really like him. And I actually have the audiobook on Libby that I have to reread. So I probably could have done that before this, but here we are. I read it at a bonfire, which was a good atmosphere.
Interesting.
But yeah, that would be that, To Catch a Raven by Beverly Jenkins. And I want to go back and read the other two in the series, but I sinned and read that one first. It's book number 3.
I own all 3 of them.
Me too.
I haven't read them yet.
I mean, technically they were in New York, but I had them from the library and I had means. I just didn't.
So my next one, which since I had not read that last one, my next one you have not read, and it is The Rogue Not Taken by Sarah MacLean.
I have heard you talk about this.
Yeah, because it is one of my favorite Sarah MacLean books. For those of you who don't know, I read quite literally, with the exception of 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake, I had already read. But other than that, I had never read a Sarah MacLean book until September, and then I read all of them in order. I read all of them. Anyway, this one is about the youngest Talbot sister, Sophie, who is the least scandalous of 5 very scandalous sisters. The Talbot sisters, they're known as the Soiled S's, or the Dangerous Daughters, because they were originally, I want to say, like, their dad was, like, a coal miner, or, like, not a mine, but, like, owned a mine, and then was made an earl, so they were not born aristocrats, and so the ton does not welcome them with open arms. They think they're very lowborn and dirty. And also, all of the daughters, with the exception kind of Sophie, love being very scandalous and dressing outrageously and causing a scene. So this book opens, interestingly, with the hero and the heroine of the 3rd book, which is A Second Chance, like Marriage in Crisis. So Sophie's oldest sister has trapped a duke into marriage. So Sophie's at this, like, garden party, and she's, like, kind of miserable. And all of her sisters are dressed very outrageously. And she, like, wanders off into, I want to say it's, like, a greenhouse. And she finds her brother-in-law, the Duke of Haven, having sex with another woman. And she's
you
like,
did tell me about this.
What are you doing? And he, like, doesn't stop. Which is wild, by the way. She's like, hey. And he's like, leave. He's just, like, inside of another woman. And he's like, you need to leave. And she's like, no, I'm not gonna leave. Like, you have the audacity. And then her pregnant sister walks in and is like, what are you looking at? And Sophie's like, I need you to leave. And Sarah's like, what? And she's like, oh. So it's real awkward. And then so finally he, like, exits the woman he was in and, like, sends her off. And
Exit.
They have, they have this, like, horrible fight where he's basically, like, super nasty to his pregnant wife and says that, like, no matter what she says, he's never gonna believe that that child is his. Like, he says these horrible things to her. And Sophie is so mad that she, like, shoves him as he's turning, and she shoves him into a pretty shallow, but she, like, shoves him into a pond. And then it turns out everyone the party has watched this happen. And he's livid because he just got shoved into a pool. And so he basically is like, I'm gonna ruin your life. And everybody's super judgy of her. And she has this outburst where she's basically like, fuck all of you. Like,
Props
I hate
to her.
all of you. She's like, y'all are all horrible. And they immediately, like, turn their backs on her and go back to the party and, like, shun her. They're like, done.
We
So
don't
she's
take
like,
the high
I'm
roads
out.
in 2022. This is
So
a road
she's like,
trip.
I'm
We take
out.
the low roads.
I want to go home. And home, we're talking about, like, this northern towns, like, up on the border of Scotland. Like, I want to go home. But first, she's got to get out of here. And so she comes around the house, and as she's coming around the house, she gets hit on the head with a boot. And she's like, pardon me. And clothes are getting thrown out of this window. And suddenly, the Marquess of Eversley, who is, like, a notorious rake, who also, notably, he was mentioned in one of the early, I want to say, I mean, it must have been in the Casino series, I think. They, like, there's, like, a little scene where they, he owes money at the gaming hell, and Sophie's really nice to one of the, I can't remember which heroine it is, but she's really, it must be the fourth book. She's nice to the heroine. And so the heroine is like, hey, that guy owes us money, go make him dance with her, because it'll, like, make her night. So they, like, have this little dance at this ball, and so this is years later. Anyway, I just love the little Easter eggs. Anyway, the Marquess of Eversley is named Kingscote, which is a horrible name. He has this horrible long name. He goes by...
His name, like, first name is Kingscote?
Kingscote.
Huh.
Yeah, he has a horrible long name. He goes by King.
Well,
and she bullies him for this incessantly. Anyway, he's climbing out of this woman's window, and her fiance is, like, raging at him. And the woman is super cool about it. She's like, thanks so much. Thank you, King. Like, she's super
Pushing
cool, which is, like, a weird energy. And so she's like, you have to make a quick escape. I also have to make a quick escape. Please let me use your carriage. And he's like, no. She's, like, holding his boot hostage. He's like, keep it, bye. They have this whole fight. And so finally, she ends up, like, paying his footman to, she's like, I will, like, you can come work for us, we'll pay you better. If you just, like, I'll pay you and trade clothes with me. Well, not trade. He, like, gets a, like, livery from someone, and she wears his clothes, except for the shoes that don't fit, so she's wearing slippers. So she has to, like, be the outrider on this carriage, and she thinks they're just, like, heading back to Mayfair. It'll be a quick drive. And then, I think, like, an hour or so later, maybe two, she realizes that they are not going back to Mayfair. They're, like, out on a road somewhere, and she's like, uh-oh, I'm gonna fall off this carriage. Like, what am I gonna do? And she's like, hey, I need to talk to the Marquess. And the driver's like, what are you even talking? He's not in the carriage. He's meeting us at the posting inn. And she's like, the inn? What are you talking about? So he gets there. He was racing his friends because he likes to race carriages. I'm really just giving the full plot of this book because it's so delightful. And he immediately recognizes that she is that she's Sophie Talbot. Right. He's like, everyone is blind, but he doesn't out her. Because he thinks it's funny that everyone thinks she's, like, a footman. And is, like, making her, like, do jobs and sleep in the stables and stuff. And he's like, yeah, be miserable. I know who you are. Go be miserable. But then he can't sleep. Because he feels so horrible. And, like, what if she's being taken advantage of? Like, what is he going to do? So he goes out to find her. And as he's walking into the, like, stables where the servants are all sleeping, he hears them talking to her. And I don't remember exactly what the conversation is. But basically they're saying these things where she's like, so I just, like, put it in my mouth, like, all at once? And they're like, yeah, all at once. And he, like, freaks out and, like, storms in and is like, get your hands off the lady. And it turns out they were teaching her, like, take a shot, I think. Or, like, to, like, drink ale, whatever. But now he's, like, outed her as a woman to all of these people. So she's like, you ruined everything. I'm gonna walk and go find a posting inn. And he's like, in the middle of the night in your slippers, you're gonna go walk off? You're going the wrong way. So they have this horrible fight. And then he wakes up in the morning and it turns out he carries all these extra carriage wheels with him because he likes to race his carriage. So he has these specially designed carriage wheels for his specially designed carriage. And he wakes up and she has stolen them and sold all of them to his best friend. and use the money to buy a ticket on, like, a coach. And so he has to go track her down, and by the time he gets there, she's still dressed as a man. By the time he gets there, she is defending them from a highwayman who's there to take back a little kid that is running away. And then she gets shot just as he gets there. And so then in order to stay with her, and they're like, whoa, we don't know you. You can't just take her. And he's like, I'm her husband. So then they have to pretend to be married while they go find this doctor. Important to know about the doc. I'm really just giving you the whole plot of this book. The doctor is very handsome. It is noted. She's like, he's really handsome. No, like every character notices. And at one point she's like, you're very handsome. And he's like, yes, I know.
Does he get a book? I hope so.
No, but you see him and he just pops up. You're like, oh, the handsome doctor is back. And he's also more enlightened than any other doctor ever. And he understands germs and such because he's better than them. Anyway, so she recovers, but then they're on this road trip. And then he's like, I'll take you, but you have to, I'm going to see my dad because I have to go. Like, he's summoned me. I think he's dying. And I have stayed away from home because he is responsible for the death of the only woman I ever loved. And because it was a class difference thing and he didn't want me to marry her and I hate him so much and the line is going to die with me. I'm never going to get married or have kids.
Naturally.
But hear me out. And she's like, well, I'm also going to that town. There was this guy. She like, there was like some kid that like the baker's son and she thought they were going to get married. And she doesn't actually think that she's going to go marry this guy, but she says it to be petty. Like, oh, I'm going to go, like, we still love each other. I'm going to go marry him. And he's like, okay, bet. Yeah, I'll take you. But you have to be my fake fiance to piss off my dad. And so they have a road trip up to the border of Scotland. And then they get forcibly married, which is a whole thing because he doesn't want to get trapped into marriage the way that her sister trapped the Duke into marriage. But then there's a misunderstanding. And she was going to trap him, but then she decided not to. But then they slept together. And then he thought that she tried to trap him. And so they like forcibly get married. And it's miserable and it's so dramatic. Anyway, I've talked for so long about this book. But it's because it's just like
it
delightful.
Sounds very good. Yeah.
Like you're just having a good time the whole time. And they have sex in the carriage, obviously. And it's really hot. It's really, really hot. King is so fun. Like, he's very charming and rakish, even though he's kind of awful. Like, they're kind of awful to each other initially, but it's good. You know. It's that banter where you're like, oh, you're on intellectually on the same level. And she's, like, the youngest and least scandalous and least pretty, she thinks, of her sisters. And he's like, I don't know why you would ever think that. You're the most interesting by far of your sisters, which is, again, another example of the, like, I see you trope. Anyway, that is all I will say because I really have rambled on about it. But I love it very much.
Well, I think if you like that book, A Week to Be Wicked by Tessa Dare is just so delightful. It's on the same vein. Not really. I mean, that book is absurd, the one that you just talked about. But this is absurd in a different way. Basically, it follows Minerva and Colin. This is book 2 in the series. So she's like the least like pretty. She's very bookish. Little bit like snarky, and he's like a rake. You know, we open the book up. They've had like interactions in the first book, but you open this book up with her knocking on his door, and he has this whole conversation with her, and she's like, hey, I need you to come with me to this archaeological like conference, because she's an archaeologist and she's found a dinosaur footprint. Or they don't call it a dinosaur, they call it something else, but it's like a dinosaur footprint in this cave. And he's like, this is the middle of the night. I'm not going to take you to this conference. And she's already like ready to be ruined. Like she's not trying to marry him, but she's like ready to be ruined. He's like, this is going to ruin you. She's like, I don't care. And he's like, I don't want to do this. And she's like, I don't care. Like, you have to do this. And then like the next day or something, they like end up in this cave. She discovers pleasure. Like it's a very like quick to burn book. They like have to go into this cave, and the way the tide rolls in, they're like stuck in there because he doesn't want to go underwater and swim. Like, she's fine swimming, whatever, but he's like, I don't like dark and closed spaces. And so obviously he's in a cave, he's stressed out. So she just like sits on his lap and they like start making out.
Iconic of her.
And so she's having a good time, and then the tide
I might as well twist this to my advantage.
Yeah. So the tide recedes, And they are able to walk out. They've got her like notes or casts. Like she like showed him the footprint because he was like, I don't even believe like you have anything to say at this archaeological thing. And so she convinces him. They end up on this road trip. And it is just an amazing rom-com. Like it is a true romp. The first inn that they get to, they pretend to be brother and sister. And
Choice.
and he's like a storyteller. And so he's just like the entire book just telling random stories to random people getting in trouble. So he's like, yeah, we were in the circus and like, or actually this time they were royalty. So they were like these like hidden away like royal family members, like prince and princess, and they're on the run. And this family that they're trying to like ride in the coach with, because their coach gets at some point ransacked or something. The family is like, oh, whoa, this is crazy. Like, you guys are so cool. And he's like, my sister. And she's like, who are you? And they go in the room and they hear in the middle of the night, these two people having crazy monkey sex. They're like, whoa, what's going on? Like, she wakes up and she's like, because they're in the same bed, because he has, like, his stipulation is that she has to sleep with him just next to each other, not sex or anything, but
right.
she has to be in the bed. So she's like, wakes up and she's just kind of like staring in the dark, like, whoa, like they are going at it. Like, what is happening? Someone's being murdered. Like, she thought she was like, we need to go help them. And he's like, we don't need to do anything. Like, they're fine.
He said they are good.
They are good.
More than, they are great, in fact.
And so then she's like curious, and he's like, oh, you feel like, is that doing anything for you? And she's like, yeah, it kind of is. And he's like, okay. So then he like dry humps her on top of the covers.
Noted.
So like there's a cover between them, and like they like go at it, but like no penetration or anything. So hot. This is like 20% into the book, like very soon. And so they are very loud too. He's like, don't like reserve anything, like throw it all out. And so the next morning they see this family that they were going to hitch a ride with. They're like, hey. And the family's like, you incestuous Bloomfelds.
No, I forgot they were pretending to be brother and sister.
It was the parents in the next room that they heard going at it. So this family is disgusted and horrified. They throw their, like, some of their luggage out. Some of it stays with this family. And so they're now without a carriage again. And somehow they keep going. She's angry at him for making this elaborate ruse because it ultimately led to them being stranded.
I would never recover. Just so we're clear. It doesn't matter that it's not true. I would have died and right there in front of that inn.
And they like told everyone at the inn too. They're like, these people were getting up to some shit last night, and they're like related, like brother and sister. So they've been like tossed out of this inn. They end up at this estate of a hero in book 4. You first see him in this book, and he is like hosting an orgy. Sure. And she is like, he says she's his like Russian mistress. So she barely talks, but when she does, it's in like this very wild Russian accent. And he like starts to play cards, and he's like betting away their last like shilling or something. And so she's like slaps him in the face, pretending to be like this enraged mistress, and she like slaps him in the face. She pours wine on him, licks it off of him. She's like trying to get him to go up to the bedroom. So then they get upstairs. I believe she sucks his dick, and it's relevant. So she does that, and I think at this point they stumble to the festival. And at one point he's like, yeah, she was a first, because then he's like, yeah, we were in the carnival together, and we're married, and we were in the carnival, and we're like crazy. And he's like, yeah, she's a first-rate sword swallower. Because the night before she like sucked his dick. When I tell you, I screamed. Like, truly, I was in my apartment alone. I was on the floor. And so that happened. And obviously I'm also giving you the entire plot of this book because it's too good not to.
This is not what our podcast goal was. We were not going to just recount the plots of books. So I think in future I'll try to be better.
Yeah.
However,
but this one, it needed to happen.
You just need to know all the things.
Because most people have read this book. So it's really, this is just for Caroline. And so his whole tragic backstory is that his parents, he was asleep in a carriage. His parents, they got into an accident. And so that's why he hates confined spaces. He doesn't like riding in a carriage. It's been a whole thing throughout the book.
That's so interesting. The Rogue Not Taken, he's also, like, he can't ride in enclosed spaces.
I find the similarities. I just feel like they're very
carriage accident.
Very like similar feel books. Like they're crazy but also fun.
Like in a historical road trip, the quickest way to make the road trip more uncomfortable is to have one of your characters be really uncomfortable with traveling in a carriage for some dark traumatic reason.
Exactly. And so he has henceforth pretty much like ridden outside of carriages. He's tried not to be in them. And then there's this like huge storm, and she's so close to this Scottish archaeology thing that they have to ride through the night in a storm. And he is like horrified. He doesn't want to do it, but he does it because he loves her. He doesn't know it yet. And their carriage gets like stuck in the mud, turned over, and he's like freaking out. And at that point, she like helps him get through it. And then because I think like the footman is like going off because his estates are somewhere around there. So he's like going to get like a fresh set. And maybe that's where they first have sex, is like at his actual estate. But they like end up like, maybe not, because they end up banging in the carriage in the rain, and they like end up like tilting it like out, and like they knock it over, and they're like upside down because they like shake the carriage so much. And he's like, get out, save yourself. Like, I will stay here with your dinosaur footprint, because they couldn't get that out of the door. And she's like, no, I'm literally she's got a gun. She's like, I'm going to shoot you if you don't get out, because I do not care about that dinosaur. And he's like, you need to go.
Kind of counterintuitive, queen.
And so she's like holding the gun, and there's a shot, and he's like, oh my God, she's killed me. She has killed me. But she shot the dinosaur footprint so that he would have no reason to stay behind, so that he had to come with her.
I'm mad on behalf of her dinosaur footprint.
I know. I mean, they can technically get more because it's this.
Why didn't she just stay in the I'll read the book.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm asking.
So she shoots the footprint. He thinks he's dead. And then she's like, get the fuck out. We're going. We're leaving. And he's like, okay, fine. Then they go to his estate. And he has this whole inner thing of he doesn't deserve her. And she's too good for him, too smart. And then he has this revelation, which every hero should have. He's like, I don't deserve her, but no one else does. So I will be better for her. And he just works through it. And it's the hottest thing I've ever read. Like, you thought there was going to be a breakup. You thought there was going to be a fight scene. But it's truly just him being like, yeah, I'll be better. Like, I'll be what she needs. And she obviously is like, he's good enough as he is, as I love him as he is. And so there's no breakup. They get to this Scottish thing. And obviously he thinks that she's been corresponding and in love with the Scottish guy. And the guy like opens the door, and he's like very big and very attractive. And Colin's like, oh, of course, like he's huge and pretty. And they ended up not doing that because they won't let her in. But then she tells this guy at lunch, like they all go to lunch together, and he's like, wow, you're very smart. Let's talk more, whatever. And I think they like get married. And the one other thing I won't spoil completely for you, but he calls her by the wrong M name the entire book. So then when he finally calls her Minerva, it's always very cute because he's like Melissa Miranda. So A Week to Be Wicked. You need to read it.
Okay. Well, now we've talked for a very long time, so I won't break down the rest of these, but I want to mention my other recommendations, which are, well, really the only other full-on road trip romances I have are both of India Holton's books. The League of Gentlewomen Witches, but also technically there's some really good scenes in the Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels with like them having to pretend to be married and getting like, she gets drunk and she's never been drunk before and he has to take care of her. Really, that entire book is you think Ned is like the charismatic, rakish, charming, like you think he's the one that's going to be the problem, but in reality, very prim and proper Cecilia is the most chaotic character of all time, and she just runs around leaving fires in her wake. And so it's like watching Ned try to herd cats, like keeping track of her, and it's delicious. Well, and then Alex O'Reilly hooked me up.
Oh God, that
the League
book.
Of Gentlewomen,
I mean, they
which is
pushed
also a road trip,
and they pushed two beds together because
sure
it's
do.
insulting that there's two beds in this
Relatable
room.
Of them. Which we're gonna do a whole episode on India Holton. So,
and then we had Heartbreaker. Obviously, we've done a full episode on that.
Talk about that. And then my other one was why can I not remember the whole title? The Perfect Crimes of Marian Hayes.
I thought you were going to talk about that one.
I do love that book. It's one of my favorite books. It's like chaotic, semi-Robin Hood, not like a retelling, but it's inspired clearly by Robin Hood.
Part epistolary.
It's hard to really talk too much about the plot without giving away, because it and the queer principles of Kit Webb like overlap very heavily. And
we could do an
set
episode
up
on
the
them.
Premise of Marian Hayes, it gives away a lot of the queer principles of Kit Webb. Which is another book that I love very much. But it's just like two bisexual disasters causing chaos and committing crimes.
More disasters.
And it is so good. It has also some really, really interesting, well-written sex scenes that deal with consent and like setting boundaries in a really lovely way. And it's Cat Sebastian, so that's not surprising at all. But it also is a really good like road trip. And it takes them a very long time, and they have various horse and traveling issues, and also she's like just shot someone. So
I was gonna say she's truly just shot someone, and that's my vibe.
Potentially killed someone. So I love that book. And I have a list of books that are not road trips, but have road trip moments in them, which are Devil in Winter, which has one of my favorite romance like road trip moments. It's so he's like, I'm the villain and this is a marriage of convenience and I don't care about you. And then he spends the whole time like bringing her heated bricks to warm her up and like letting her sleep on him and just generally caring for her the most tender. And then they make it there and they get married because it's their marriage of convenience in Scotland. And then she's so tired that he just like bathes and combs her hair and puts the powder on her
hair
toothbrush.
Brushing scene.
Oh, it's so good. Portrait of a Scotsman also has a brief traveling period, which is really delightful. Really, Lisa Kleypas loves a train scene. Anytime there's like characters going on a honeymoon, there's usually a train scene. She just loves trains, so I think about like Chasing Cassandra. I think their like honeymoon starts on a train. Yep. There are some other ones.
Book is so good.
The Hellion and the Hero, they like they just go to Monte Carlo for a while. Sure, why not?
Naturally,
why not? And then Any Rogue Will Do is also a little. They like meet when they're both traveling, and so it's by Bethany Bennett, I should say. And so they have kind of an interesting like reconnection while they're both on the road 10 years after he like embarrassed her and ruined her first season.
That was a good book.
It is a really good book.
And I liked the premise of it.
It's like fake engagement, but they like meet while they're on a road trip, and so they have a good like they have some fun interactions at an inn. That's really all. So
my only other two are Outrageous by Minerva Spencer. It is her second in the Rebels of the Ton series. Book one was fine, but I truly had the best time reading book two. He was the villain in book one. He was going to kidnap one of those characters at the beginning of this book, and the hero's sister in book one, so she's the main character in this one, she basically knocks this guy out. He was like turning around. He wasn't actually going to kidnap anyone. He realized the error of his ways. He was being way too dramatic, and she didn't know that. She couldn't read his mind, and so she was like, I'm going to take care of this issue.
Had gotten to Sebastian St. Vincent.
I think I do think you would like. He's a little bit unhinged, and so is she. And so like I think she's got like a little bit like they've got like Sebastian vibes going on.
Sure.
So he gets knocked out. She's like, I'm gonna take care of this problem. They're gonna get married because he was trying to break up a wedding. Obviously didn't work. And so she just gets him in this carriage and starts driving. Her plan was to just take him far enough away there he wasn't going to be a problem. But he wakes up, overpowers her. Now he's the captain, and now she's been kidnapped. There's a pretty big age difference. I think she's like 19 and he's 30 something. So that's like pretty drastic if you're not into that. I know. It worked for me. It did not work for everyone in the reviews. I was unbothered, really. I was like, it is what it is.
Takes a lot to bother me.
Yeah, I mean, not me. I'm bothered very easily, but this one didn't bother me.
You are bothered easily?
Oh, I am. There were multiple times where they each could have just, left. There was no real reason for them to continue, but they both wanted to, so... But I understand if you were made uncomfortable by it. And then they got held up by this kid who was, trying to be a highwayman, but he had, a very outdated pistol, and it was a whole thing.
Yet another thing you can only do in historical road trips that you can't do in contemporary. Highway robbers. It's delicious every time. Oh, you've been shot and now I have to pretend to be your husband so we can get you to a doctor. Oh, you accidentally killed someone because plot twist, you're the highway robber and now we're on the run. You're in danger. And suddenly I'm recognizing my feelings for you now at this inopportune moment because we're being robbed. You don't have that in contemporary life.
I truly, not much more to say, but I love a reformed villain. So my next one is The Runaway Duchess by Joanna Lowell. These all have illustrated covers. She was the villain in the previous book. I read that book
lightly.
Yeah, her father was the real villain, so then she was just kind of the mean girl. It's kind of what her role was in that book. And so then she comes into this book and she got married to this very old crusty man. She does not want to consummate it, so she runs. And she runs straight to this globe-trotting botanist.
Sure.
So he's traveling with her. He thinks she's this so it's mistaken identity. So she is this society miss and he is a working class guy. And he thinks she's the botanist he's been looking for, that they're going to travel together. And so she's like, yep, that's me. And she knows nothing about botany. And it's very fun when he discovers. And I don't think this one was as steamy as book one, but I enjoyed this one a lot more than book one. It was very light and fluffy. And they were just very adorable. And it the lie basically went on for 50% of the book. So you got her just being very... a bad botanist for a lot of it.
I could not lie about that for that long.
Neither could she. And he was very confused. He was like, you're supposed to be one of the best, but you got some very unorthodox methods. So yeah, I had a very good time. Both of those are kind of... Oh, and Mary Jane Wells narrated it. Did not remember that. But yeah, I recommend them both. They were very good times. And I do love a reformed bad character. Or redeemed is more of the term I use at this point. But yeah, those are 2 road trip ones.
Well, this went way longer and was basically just us summarizing books because they're really good and think that everyone should read them.
Well, I think it's hard to do this kind of episode without giving at least mild summaries.
Ours were not mild.
Well, we just
rambled on and on.
Because
it's just because I want you to read it very badly.
And I want you to read the Tessa Dare one, so I think we have been felled by our own sword. But yeah, maybe we'll do an update when we both read them.
Yeah. Well,
we've gotten to the point.
To the point where we don't know how to end. You can find us on socials. Fringe Book Reviews. Salty Caroline Reads. Romancer TBR.
Romance it. Are you romanced? Have I romanced you?
Are you trying to romance me? It's working.